when our kids are in school from kindergarten through 12th grade, they spend somewhere between 15 to 16,000 hours away from their parents. That's a really long time. That's a lot of influence to lose on our kids to trust to someone else. And yes, we need the voices of other people like Summit. I love that you pour into the hearts of these kids. And again, that's parents directing their kids to have someone else pour into their lives. But when we're apart from our kids during their childhood for 15,000 hours of their childhood, we've lost a lot of influence in their lives. And we're trusting someone else to do the work of pointing them to Jesus that God has called us to do as their parents.
What is the most important thing in educating your kids? And what if asking that question leads you to homeschooling and you don't want to do it? That's the story of our guest today. Hey everyone, welcome to the Dr. Jeff Show podcast, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, Edify, Liftable, wherever you get your podcasts. If you like the show, please take a moment to review it on your favorite platform to help more people know about these interviews with great guests like the one I have today. These are major thought leaders from many fields of influence, and they show how the truth changes everything. My guest today, Yvette Hampton. She's a homeschool mom through and through, but when Yvette and her husband initially got married, they said they would never homeschool their kids. Well, never say never. God radically changed their minds. Not only have they homeschooled their own children, but Yvette has also produced a feature-length documentary called Schoolhouse Rocked, The Homeschool Revolution, and she hosts the podcast Schoolhouse Rocked. Thousands and thousands of people follow what she's saying, and you're going to find out why as she answers the questions and we engage about how we can have a cultural shift by encouraging people to see everything through the truth of God's word. Please welcome Yvette to the show. Yvette Hampton, welcome to the Dr. Jeff Show podcast.
Oh, thank you. I am so excited to be here with you.
It was fun to be on your podcast on Schoolhouse Rocked.
Yes.
And I learned all about this new documentary that you've put together, digging into something that whether they choose to homeschool or Christian school or public school or whatever, people need to know the state of education in our country. Yeah. And that's what you dig into there. So it was fun to be on the show. And
thank you.
You've got a Summit kid coming up this
We
summer.
do. Yes, we do. My oldest daughter, she's 18. She's graduating, she's graduating now. And her two best friends all just graduating, and they're going to be there in August. And we are so excited about them going. This will be their first time.
I think they're going to have a great time. It's fun to come with friends. It's also fun if you just come by yourself because you'll instantly make friends. Right. And you find that you're part of a network of people who love Jesus. And it's really special. We had an event this last weekend, so we're recording this in April, Eastertide, and there was a testimony from a young woman who came to Summit Ministries 20 some years ago.
Wow.
And she said, it was the first time in my life I ever met boys who didn't want anything from me except for me to grow closer to the Lord.
Wow.
I thought, what an amazing thing for a young woman to be able to say.
Yes.
I was so honored by that and redoubled my commitment that that'll be the experience of our students this summer too.
Yes. Yeah. Exciting stuff.
Well, let's talk about Schoolhouse Rocked first and a little bit about your work. And then this year, every year at this time, we put together shows on education and how parents are going to be making all of those kinds of decisions. So this is our chance to really dig in.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's do it.
Talk about the documentary first.
Sure.
Because once you start there, it's going to get into your personal story, the education choices that you made for your family, and how that all unfolded.
Sure. Well, the documentary, I guess, was birthed, you can say, back in 2016. And there's kind of a crazy story that goes behind that. We started homeschooling in 2010. I was pregnant with my youngest daughter. We were one of those families who said we would never, ever, ever, ever homeschool. I mean, we were just adamant about it.
Now, why did you have that? Why did you have that belief?
Sure. Well, and that actually plays into the documentary too. So that's a great question. We really believed all the misconceptions and negative stereotypes about homeschooling. We didn't understand really what homeschooling was. And as my husband and I were growing up, we knew a few people who were homeschooled, but we thought they were all weird. And, you have that stereotype. They're weird, unsocialized, they're just awkward people. And so that was kind of our image of homeschooling, and top that with the fact that I hated school growing up. And when I say hated, I mean, I legitimately despised everything academic. I was academics were very difficult for me growing up. And so I thought, well, why would I want to do it again? I mean, I don't want to go to school again into homeschool. That means I have to go to school and do it all over again. And I didn't like it the first time. And so it was the whole, we just didn't understand it. And then I just thought there's no way I could do it. And of course I wasn't trained as a teacher. And so there was no way I could possibly teach my child and all the things that we believed. And then what happened was when our oldest was 4, about to turn 5, I was expecting my youngest daughter. We have 2 daughters. And we were faced with that decision about where she would go to school. And we thought she had to go to pre-K. That was kind of a thing for us, because that's what most people in Southern California did. And when we were faced with the reality of that, we looked at the public school systems in our area, because we were in LA County, and we thought, well, nope, that's not a great option for us. And we could not afford the only private school we would have wanted her to go to. And I would have had to work, but because I was expecting a baby, I couldn't work. And so we said, well, we'll just homeschool for this year. And we were invited by some friends to go to a homeschool convention that summer, the summer of 2010. And so we went to a homeschool convention, and that summer alone, that convention we went, and it completely just changed our hearts and our minds about homeschooling, because we got to see the big picture of it and see it for what it really was. And so the Lord just did a complete turn of heart on both my husband and I. We came back and said, this is what we're going to do. And we have no idea what we're doing. And, sweat on our brows, knees knocking. We were terrified. But we knew that this was what the Lord was calling us to do. And so we jumped in with both feet. And again, she was 4. So there wasn't a whole lot of pressure. It's a little bit more difficult when kids are going into middle school or high school. Still doable, of course, but it was a little bit less scary because she was so young. So that started our homeschool journey. And we just dug in and we loved it. And as I was teaching her, I was learning myself so many things. Of course I knew early elementary things, but I just was learning things alongside of her. And even my little one, as she was growing into, her toddler years, she was learning alongside of us. And it was just so much fun. And so in 2016, we felt like the Lord was calling us to leave California. And my husband had worked in the Hollywood film industry for many, many years. And long story short, I can't get into all the details of that story here because we don't have enough time. But we just felt like the Lord was saying, it's time to go. It's time to leave California. And I want you to make this documentary on homeschooling, really to answer all of the same questions that we had about homeschooling, to debunk all of the misconceptions, to just open people's eyes to the beauty of what homeschooling was. Because when we went to that convention in 2010, I felt like the scales literally fell from our eyes. And we were like, wow, this is amazing for our family, for our kids. And so we wanted to share that with people. And at the same time, we were learning still. We were in our, 6th year of homeschooling, maybe at that time. So we were still young in our homeschooling years. And so we really wanted to learn from people around the country and at the same time be able to share what the Lord had shown us. So that's how the movie started. And so we left California in 2016, December of 2016. We sold our house. We sold everything in our house. We loaded up in an RV, not really knowing where we were going to go. And we drove out of California, trusting the Lord to help us find home and to just orchestrate this documentary, and trusted him for the cast and everything else. So yeah, that is a pretty crazy story.
It's a great story. A lot of people followed in your wake out of California, I think, in the last few years. This point that you've made a couple of times, though, about this homeschooling convention, I find that fascinating as well, because I do think a lot of people think, oh, well, I'll just look up homeschooling online, watch a YouTube video or whatever. It's really important to go to something like that. And every state has at least one, don't they?
Pretty much every state that I know of.
And you can find out when it is. Usually it's in the spring or maybe early summertime. And when you go to one of these, and I've been to a bunch of these to speak, it opens up. You realize, oh my goodness, there are people here who look like they're Amish. There are people here who look like they're just hippies. They're right. That our family could actually do this. And we're part of something that's way bigger than just us.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's so funny you say that, because that first convention that we went to, it was in Los Angeles. And I remember going and thinking, okay, it's going to be a sea of minivans in the parking lot, which it was. And I thought everyone was going to look like the Amish, right? And we walked in, and I vividly remember that first day seeing a family. It was a young couple, and they had, I think, 2 or 3 kids with them. I remember they were pushing a stroller, and they had tattoos all over their bodies. And they were just like, they just looked so happy and content, and they're walking around looking at Christian curriculum and all this stuff. And I just thought, you know what? This is for everyone. Like, homeschooling is for everybody, no matter where you are in life. And so that image sticks in my head of seeing that particular couple and just kind of that light bulb going, oh, okay. It's like, I can actually do this.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a funny competitive aspect, right?
Right.
If they can do it, I can do it.
Right. Exactly.
Well, this is really interesting. There are some people who are watching or listening right now whose children, they're kind of in that space. What do we decide? And they're considering some of their options. And you mentioned the private Christian schools that are available. There are many excellent schools. Sometimes they are out of the budget, though, for a lot of families. Yeah. That wouldn't be your only decision, but when you talk about these objections that people have to homeschooling as a choice that they can make for their kids, what are some of those things? Because I bet some of them are roadblocks for a lot of people.
Sure.
Like, I would do it except for this.
Right. Well, I think probably the biggest one that most parents believe is that, or most moms believe, I won't say parents, there's kind of a divide. It seems like most dads are afraid that moms aren't going to have what it takes, and they're afraid that their kids are not going to be socialized. Most moms have kind of overcome the whole socialization thing, but most moms feel very inadequate. And that's across the board. I mean, we've talked to moms who have been homeschooling for 2 years, and we've talked to moms who have been homeschooling for 25 years. And across the board, most homeschool moms, and myself included, feel somewhat inadequate to homeschool our kids, unless you are you've got a PhD in education or something, and you say, oh yeah, I've got this. But most moms, even if they have been teachers in a classroom, feel ill-equipped to teach their kids at home, because even if you've been in a classroom, maybe you've taught elementary, but you haven't taught middle school or high school, or maybe you've taught high school science, but you haven't taught all the elementary grades in middle school. And so we all feel like we can't do this. We're just not enough for what our kids are going to need in order to get a good education. And so I think that's probably the number one roadblock. The second one, of course, is socialization, though we see that really shifting. Most people are seeing what is happening in public schools with kids being socialized, and they're saying, I don't want that for my kids. I mean, homeschool has blown up, of course, since COVID. And so homeschooled kids are not weird. Well, okay, let me say, there are weird homeschool kids, but I think it's Heidi St. John who says, your kids are going to be as weird as you are. There are weird public school kids. There are weird private school kids. There are weird homeschool kids. There just are kids who are just odd, but that doesn't mean that all homeschool kids are odd. Some are. And some homeschool parents still really keep their kids in a bubble. But for the most part, kids nowadays have so many options for activities and sports. I mean, we live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have an entire homeschool sports organization. We have baseball and football and basketball and volleyball. I mean, we've got, track, we've got all the sports, and it's all homeschooled kids. And so not every area in the country has that, but overall, most people have access to at least a co-op, people in their church who are homeschooling, and it's not as weird and odd as it used to be. So I think that would be the other one. But the other thing really is that people just think that the teachers in the classroom are going to teach them better. They've been trained to do this, and so they're going to trust them to a classroom teacher. And so that kind of goes back to the just feeling ill-equipped to be able to teach kids. But I think those two things are really the biggest reasons that people have for not homeschooling. Mm.
I have a friend who's a medical doctor and homeschooling her child and feels inadequate.
Yeah.
She's got a lot of professional training, a decade of professional training. But when it comes to something with her child, it seems completely different. How did you overcome that for in your own life? And I know you talk to a lot of moms, thousands and thousands of moms. How did you overcome it, and how do you help them overcome it?
Well, I don't know that I would say I have completely overcome that.
Okay,
And I don't think
fair
I
enough.
ever will, to be honest with you, because the enemy wants us to believe that the things that we're doing with our kids that are honoring to the Lord, we're not doing well enough. We're not good enough. We're not all those things. And one of the things that I have realized about homeschooling is that it's not me, but it's God through me who's doing what I'm doing. And the wonderful thing about that I have realized is that in the end, we are not going to be able to look back, my husband and I, and say, we were so amazing as parents. We were such amazing educators. We were so amazing at doing all these things. We're only going to be able to look back and say, look what God did because we were obedient to what he called our family to do. And then he gets all the praise and all the glory for it. And none of that praise and glory comes to me. And so, because it would be easy for me to pat myself on the back and say, wow, I was the most amazing homeschool mom. Look at what I overcame. And that's not the case at all. I mean, I still every day have to be on my knees just praying, Lord, help me. I don't know what I'm doing sometimes. I'm overwhelmed. I'm frustrated. I'm lost. I'm confused, but I'm willing to say yes and change, the lives of our girls through home education because I want to be obedient to what the Lord's called me to do. So it's him. It's not me that's doing any of this. It's just my willingness to say yes to him.
So when your daughter aces organic chemistry in college, you're not going to take the credit for that?
Oh, no. Well, and we use a lot of, homeschooling to people think that they have to do all of the work. We outsource a lot of our subjects for our girls. So, we've done Apologia online courses and we do co-op and we've done some Bob Jones University courses and things like that. So we are able to bring in other people to teach our kids so that I don't have to. And that really helps me because if I had to teach them biology and all the other things that I don't know anything about, that would be really overwhelming. But it's our job as parents to direct and guide their education. We don't necessarily have to teach all of the things to them.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was thinking parent-directed education is sometimes
Right.
maybe a better description because there's still all these things that have to be managed. We still consider in this country an educated person to know certain kinds of things that we might find it very difficult to teach, especially if we're hopping back and forth from one child to another.
Right.
But what you're saying is that's no longer a barrier in our country anyway.
No. I mean, pretty much around the world, we have people who listen to our podcast from all over the world, and they use many of the resources that we use. We have an online math course that we use with our girls, and praise God for that because I cannot teach math. I can't teach high school math to my kids. I can teach elementary math, maybe some middle school math, but you get into those high school math years and I'm like, I got nothing for you, kid. So it's great to have an online teacher for them. And it is just parent directed. Yeah.
In a way, parent directed should describe all of our experiences with our children's education.
Yes.
And I know a lot of people just, they think, okay, well, I'm going to push the easy button here. If I can pay $15,000 in tuition every year and all my friends are sending the child to this private school, so we're going to do that as well. But in a way, that's a decision. You're directing your child's education. You're out by, use the term outsourcing.
Sure.
But what you're talking about is fascinating to me because I love to learn. Everybody who's watching or listening to this is a learner. We love to learn. That's why we're even involved with this show.
Sure.
But what you've just expressed is fascinating to me. You grew up as a kid who couldn't wait to get out of school. And then as an adult, you put yourself right back into it, starting at the beginning with little children all the way through. How have you changed as a person?
Oh, so much. I will tell you the thing that has changed most about me is I have fallen more in love with Jesus. And I say that because here's the thing. Sometimes I just want to say, you know what? All academics are a sham. I don't believe that. But the reason I say that is because it's not the academics so much that matter as much as it is pointing our kids to Christ. Like that's ultimately what matters. But that's why we use academics because we use them to point our kids to Christ. So when we look at subjects like, take science, if we're teaching science apart from God as creator, you're not understanding God, the creator, and science as a whole, as he has created the universe and everything in it, including the human body and how everything works together. If you look at history, we understand that history is important because we have to understand the story that God has written and that he is still writing for our lives, and learn from people in the past and how we can, proceed in life into the future because we've learned from what people have done in the past. And that's why we read the word of God. We have to teach them to read so that they can read God's word. And we have to teach them to write so that they can write about Jesus. We have to teach them to speak so that they can speak about him. We have to teach them math because math shows us that God is a God of order, not chaos. And so academics are important if we're using them to point our kids to Christ. If we're using them in a secular way and it's pointing them away from Christ, it's a completely different it's just a different ball game. And so for myself, as I have taught my kids, this is our 13th year of homeschooling, my eyes have been so much more open to who God really is as creator. And because I've had to learn alongside of them, my husband always just says, you have to just be one step ahead of them, right? Just even one day ahead of them. That's it. You don't have to know everything that you're going to teach them. And so I learn along with them. And as I've learned along with them, I have just fallen more and more deeply in love with God and with his word because we're learning together the character of God and who he really is as our father and as our creator. So yeah, that has been the greatest blessing for myself in teaching them.
I think we learn best when we have to teach.
Yes.
I've always thought that. I know I'm sharpest when I'm going to have to stand up in front of that group right there and be coherent. I get my thoughts together. So I can completely see that. And we focus a lot on, we even call this at Summit Ministries biblical immersion. It's not just biblical integration. It's not just integrating the Bible and a secular thing. It's what you said is revolutionary if people were to just contemplate it. That everything begins with God.
Right.
And there really is no secular subject. They're just people who approach God's subjects by trying to take God out of them.
Right. And then they're not taught as a whole. They're not taught correctly because you're sucking the actual person who made that subject out of the picture. And then you wonder why people are confused in society. Well, that's probably one of the reasons.
That's got to be one of the reasons. Yeah, that you just never get the plot.
Right.
It's crazy to think, and it's sad. You can go all the way through your K through 12 education and even have a college education and still never grasp the overall plot about what life is all about.
Sure. Well, you look at society and you look at people today who are so lost and confused, and they don't know, they're searching for something, but they don't know what they're searching for. And it doesn't mean that every homeschool family is a Christian homeschool family, and it doesn't mean that every Christian family turns out Christian children, but as parents, it's our responsibility to do our very best to point them to Christ. And that also doesn't mean that every kid who goes to public school comes out, as an atheist. That's certainly not the case either. But I think we have a much better chance when we're day in and day out pointing our kids to Christ. There's the number kind of depends on who you talk to and how they figure out the number. But when our kids are in school from kindergarten through 12th grade, they spend somewhere between 15 to 16,000 hours away from their parents. That's a really long time. That's a lot of influence to lose on our kids to trust to someone else. And yes, we need the voices of other people like Summit. I love that you pour into the hearts of these kids. And again, that's parents directing their kids to have someone else pour into their lives. But when we're apart from our kids during their childhood for 15,000 hours of their childhood, we've lost a lot of influence in their lives. And we're trusting someone else to do the work of pointing them to Jesus that God has called us to do as their parents. And so you have to be very trusting.
I'm be curious if you've gotten negative feedback to the documentary. I'm sure you got positive feedback of people saying, this is what flipped the switch for me. But I'm curious because I hear it a lot here in Colorado. There's a lot more tension. And I know in Oklahoma, there are laws, now allowing charter schools to be Christian, things like that. And even the homeschooling community is very divided over whether that's a good thing. I'm just curious what kind of pushback you've gotten.
we really haven't gotten any. And I think part of the reason is the documentary is available through our website, schoolhouserocked.com. People can stream it for free. So most people who have seen it, or we've done, lots of movie nights, we've shown it at homeschool conventions, things like that. Most of the people who have seen it, I think, are already homeschoolers, or they're very seriously considering homeschooling. I think if we had it on a platform like Amazon Prime or Netflix or something like that, and just anybody could click on it and watch it free of charge, I think it would be a very different story, and we would probably get more kickback from people. But because it's placed where it is, and we didn't do that so that we wouldn't, get pushback from people. But because I think it's placed where it is, where people have to go intentionally to our Christian homeschool website to watch it, it has made it to where most people who see it are very moved by it. And I think we did a show, we did a tour through kind of the Midwest, and we were in Chicago, the Chicago area. This was a couple of years ago. And I remember going to one church and showing the film, and this lady walked out and she was just in a huff, and she was a public school teacher. And there's a part in the film that shows just, it's news footage of public schools. And it's this footage of them doing, LGBTQ, Pride Month stuff. And they're having a parade at their school. And this is just regular news footage that we put in the movie. And she was deeply offended by that. And so she walked out in a huff. But that's the only person I can think of that was like, oh, no, I don't want to watch this. And she got upset about that. So I thought, well, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Christian public school teachers are in a tough spot. They're really missionaries, aren't they?
Oh, so much.
Because you've got all this socialization things that you're supposed to do in class, and then you're supposed to do mental health checks and also teach math. And then this child decides he doesn't like math, so he needs a mental health break. And just the craziness of what these teachers have to do and put up with. we should be in deep prayer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think that the public school classroom is possibly the greatest mission field on earth. And I know that's a big claim, but they are the ones who have the hearts and minds of this upcoming generation. And it's a place where they can and should be in some way sharing the gospel and showing these kids the love of Jesus, because it may be the only time and the only place that these kids ever get that and hear that. And it is such a mission field. I wish that more people understood that. And you're right. We need to be praying for these public school teachers because they have a hard job in front of them. We would love to say that, everybody can homeschool, but we know that that's not reality. And so these teachers who have the hearts and minds of these young kids, they have a very important job, a very, very big job.
Yeah. Yeah. It is big. Have you heard of LifeWise Academy?
No, I've not.
It's called Release Time Education. LifeWise.
Okay.
Anyway, I was just curious because we partner with them. The children can leave school, their public school, for an hour every day, and then go get Bible training. And it's legal. It's legal for them to do this.
Okay.
Anyway, they have it for little kids and also for high school as well. It's for people who are watching or listening thinking, I'm not a teacher, I don't really want to get involved in that. But something like LifeWise would allow you to take some time during your day, go over to a local church. The children come from the school to the church, and you can teach them Bible.
Wow.
You can actually have that ministry, even though most schools, fortunately, are, if you're a stranger in the community, you can't just walk in and say, I'm here to help, But something like LifeWise, you actually could. I don't know why that came to my mind.
Yeah, I've not heard of that.
Yeah. So I want to keep talking about the one thing about your documentary is it kind of gets your heart as well as your mind. You really feel like, I see a vision for the kind of family that I want to have. But when you get up in the morning and you try to get your kids out of bed and you do all of that, the everydayness has got to look way different than that initial vision that you have. How do you Do you have other moms that you talk to and say, I'm in the closet right now. I'm about to have a breakdown.
Eat my chocolate.
Yeah. I mean, how do you, there's got to be, how do you handle that?
Yeah. Well, me personally, I am very blessed to have a husband who works from home. He actually produces our podcast full time and runs the Schoolhouse ministry full time. So he's home and he is a wonderful support. We're in this together. And so he's always my sounding board. He's always the one that when we have a hard day, I go to him and oftentimes he'll hear us having a hard day and he'll come out and say, all right, let's sit down and talk. How do we navigate through this? So I'm very blessed to have that. Most homeschool moms, of course, don't have their husband at home with them. And so it is really important to have community. And we also have community around us. We have a really great support system around us here in the Tulsa area, but also kind of nationwide. I mean, we're not from Oklahoma. We've only been here a couple of years. And so we have friends all over the country. You know, our closest friends live in California still. Yeah. And it's wonderful to be able to pick up a phone and not have to worry about long distance calls because there are many times where we call each other up and just say, I need you to pray for me, or a quick text message, you know, hey, just pray for us. We're having a hard day. But it's important for each other to be there to help support one another in the homeschool community. But also, I think this is where the church needs to step in. And I don't think that most churches realize the important role that they have in supporting parents, whether their kids are homeschooling or not. The older women especially, you know, and I maybe I say that because I'm a mom and I'm a woman, but I often think, you know, where are these Titus 2 women who they've raised their kids are out of the home and they're enjoying retirement maybe, you know, maybe they're not doing a whole lot. They need to be the ones who are coming alongside of the younger moms and just saying, hey, how can I help you? How can I support you? I knew a friend years ago and she had 3 little kids. They were under the age of 5. And she had a new baby and she had a neighbor who came over and she barely knew this lady, but this lady was a younger grandma, but she was not working. And she came over, knocked on her door one day and just said, hey, I'm wondering if I could just come and help you, you know, maybe once or twice a week. You know, just hold the baby or help you fold laundry or whatever. And I mean, that's like unheard of. But this woman just saw that this young mom had 3 little kids and she just could use a helping hand. And that's what the body of Christ really should look like, is people helping people working together to encourage and support one another. And so homeschool moms are often very overwhelmed, very overworked. You know, you've got people tugging at your ankles all day long, and it doesn't change when they get older. My girls are 13 and 18, and they need me as much now as they did when they were itty bitty. It's a different kind of need, but they still need me. And so there are days where I'm just overwhelmed and I'll just say to my husband, I'm going to go get some coffee, or I'm just going to go, you know, walk in the park or something. I just need to take a break. And he's always so gracious to allow me to do that, you know, and encourage me to do that. I shouldn't even say allow. I don't, you know, like I need his permission, but he encourages me to do those things because he sees that I have that need sometimes. And so, yeah, it can be a busy, overwhelming life, but again, God will give us, he gives me the strength and he gives homeschool moms the strength that we need to get through the tough days.
Yeah. I love that answer because you're still, you know, you're taking your own pulse. You still have to do self-care, right? You know, to make sure that you stay strong because you want that emotional health to spread through your whole family.
Right.
But you realize you can't do that alone. And, you know, when you first say, I think the church should do more, of course, my mind immediately goes to, okay, Pastor, we got one more job for you.
Yeah.
Which is overwhelming for people who are in ministry.
Yeah.
But there are people now, I've noticed this. In fact, there's a new book I just read called After Work. After Work. It's not retirement. These are 2 retirement planners. They're financial planners. They said it's not retirement. That's not what we're going to talk about anymore. We're going to talk about after work. After you do that job, then you get to move into something that can be missional. And they're encouraging people to do it. What are some ways, if people who are listening right now are sort of in that position, you know, they kind of played as much golf as they can play, and they're just, you know, maybe wanting to get back into it, but they feel, I mean, if moms feel how this is overwhelming, I'm sure retired people think this is doubly overwhelming. I don't even know these families. And, you know, how could they really help?
Well, I think if you're in a good, healthy church, getting, as parents, if you're involved in church and you know other people in your congregation, sometimes moms need to be the ones who connect with an older mom and just say, hey, I would love to get together for coffee or lunch someday and share with them. Because I think oftentimes the older women don't know that there's a need. They don't realize it. And I think part of the reason for that is because that generation of moms didn't homeschool. We're in a completely new world now where these homeschooling moms, our moms didn't do that. My mom always worked full time. And so she doesn't, my mom's very supportive of our decision to homeschool. She's wonderful, but she doesn't quite understand my world because she didn't live it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think it's the younger mom being able to go to the older mom or retired mom and say, hey, can I just share my heart with you and what I'm struggling with? And then those older mamas being able to step up and say, okay, I'm here. I can help you.
Yeah.
So
You don't have to be an expert. You just have to be a person.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to be an expert in anything. You need to be able to hold a baby or, and how hard is that? Just being there for that mom, I think is so important. So, and it's not to put one more thing on the shoulders of a pastor. I think this is something that could easily fall under women's ministry, but I think most people don't know that there's the need for it.
Yeah. Well, this opens up a lot of new, interesting avenues of ministry that I hadn't really thought about.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of grandparents. We work with a grandparenting ministry called the Legacy Coalition, which is fantastic.
Okay.
And a lot of them have said, my children they live long ways away. Mm-hmm. So I only get to see my grandchildren on vacation. Some have even said, my own children, sadly, don't really want me to be an influence as a grandparent.
Yeah.
But if what you're saying applies here, there could be hundreds of families in your own community who would welcome that kind of influence.
Yes. Yes, I believe so. And I know so because I've talked to many moms who are just desperate for help. They're just desperate for someone to come alongside of them and encourage them and support them. Or, a mom who has already homeschooled her kids and she's out of it. You've got the younger moms who are saying, I have no idea what to do. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to homeschool. And those older moms, and this does happen in our community. Oftentimes we have a Facebook group for our town, and it's a Christian homeschool Facebook group just for homeschool moms. The dads aren't even allowed on the group. And oftentimes younger moms will post on there and just say, I want to homeschool my kids, but I have no idea what to do. And there's a group of older moms who have already finished homeschooling, and they always will pipe in. And most of the time I will see them saying something like, here's my number, feel free to call me, or, private message me, or let's go to lunch. And they're just so willing to help. But it's because they understand, they see that there's a need and these moms are crying out for help.
Yeah. I would love to, I'm thinking of the part of our audience, young adults in their 20s. Many of them would love to be married and have children. Mm-hmm. For some, that just seems to be delayed. And then they get to that place where they're married, they want to have children, and maybe it's a dad who really has in his heart, I'd like for my children to be homeschooled, but mom doesn't get it, or vice versa. The mom has in her heart that she'd really like to have this happen, and dad doesn't get it.
Yes.
Kind of walk us through that conversation a little bit, because I know you've counseled a lot of people in this.
Yes, that is the main heart of the movie. And so we have had so many people who have come to us and said, my husband was on the fence, or my husband was not in support of it, or my wife was not in support of it, and I really wanted her to homeschool, exactly as you said. And then they watch the movie and their eyes are opened and they go, oh, this is really what homeschooling is all about. And this is how it will benefit our family. And so I think one, obviously start with prayer, whichever side is really wanting to homeschool and the other one is not wanting to homeschool. Pray about it. Just lift it up to the Lord and say, God, this is the desire of my heart, but my spouse doesn't support it. Help us to be on the same page. And I will say, if dad is not in support of it, I never recommend for a mom to just say, well, I'm going to do it anyway. I don't think that's honoring to your husband. And as the leader of the home, I believe that is the husband really needs to be in support of it, because we have seen families who the mom has done that. She's just said, well, I'm going to do it anyway because this is what I want to do. And it can cause a lot of strife in the marriage. And I think the marriage conflict is way more dangerous to the kids than the kids being in traditional school. And so I think it's really important for both parents to be on the same page, but watch the movie. Again, it's free of charge. I mean, it's schoolhouserocked.com. They can watch it. Listen to the podcast. We have a podcast as well. And we have a lot of episodes on there. One of them is called The Why of Homeschooling. And so it answers all the questions about why to homeschool. You know, what are the benefits of homeschooling? One of them is relationship with your kids. I mean, I think that is the greatest benefit that our family has seen. Way aside from the academics is the relationship I have with my girls. I never imagined ever that I would have the kind of relationship with my 18-year-old daughter that I have with her and with my 13-year-old daughter. You know, I didn't have a bad relationship with my mom, but I just have a different kind of relationship with her. But because I'm with my girls and I know them better than anyone else knows them, my girls are my best friends, my best girlfriends. I love being with them most of the time. You know, we have hard days sometimes, of course, as everybody
like real
does.
Friends.
Right. Exactly. But I love being with them. I actually, it's funny. We were talking about this the other day, my oldest and I said, there are a lot of parents who say, I'm my kid's mom. I'm not their friend. And I think, you know what? Says who? Who says that you can't be friends with your kids? Now, I am the mom and I am the authority, but Jesus was also friends with his disciples, and he was friends with everybody. Like, I mean, that's what he did, right? He established relationships and friendships with people so that he could have influence in their lives. And I want to do that with my girls as well. And I have worked really hard to do that. And so having them home with me and not missing those 15,000 hours of their childhood has allowed us to establish a really good, solid relationship with each other. And that doesn't mean it's perfect every day, but my girls come to me with things that I never imagined that they would come to me with. And we're able to just walk through life together, and they trust me and I trust them. And it is a beautiful relationship that we have with each other. And then also being able to hone in on what their strengths and their weaknesses are, you know, that's a great benefit. So if a parent is saying, well, I don't think it would be a great idea to homeschool, just that alone, that if you look at a traditional classroom, most kids are, you know, you look at the average student, many kids in a classroom are either advanced or they're really struggling in some area. So you might have a kid who's advanced in history, but they're really struggling in science, or a kid who's really advanced in math, but they're struggling in reading. Well, in homeschooling, you have the opportunity to really connect with your kids where they are, and who cares about grades, right? And when I say grades, I mean first, second, third, fourth, fifth
Sure.
grade. Who cares what curriculum they're using for that specific grade? You stay where your kids are academically so that they can succeed academically, and so that they're not frustrated. And so that's another great reason that people have for home. It's one of the greatest benefits of homeschooling. And so maybe presenting that to your spouse, that, you know, I know them, I love them more than anyone else does. We talked about teachers earlier, and there are wonderful teachers. We know many of them. We know many administrators, but there's not a teacher on the planet who's going to love your child like you do. And there's not a teacher on the planet who's going to be able to hone in on your specific child's strengths and weaknesses and character development like you can as their parent, because they're yours and you know them best. And so yeah, if parents are divided on this, that's a hard situation. But I would say watch the movie, because it really, really will answer so many questions that people have about homeschooling.
And the movie's called Schoolhouse Rocked. And the podcast, you go to schoolhouserocked.com.
Yes.
And you can find out more information. Yvette, I can see why so many moms turn to you for advice and counsel and friendship, because your passion really comes through, and also your love for your kids, but also just your concern for this rising generation.
Sure.
We want them to turn out well. We want this to be a good country and not a bad one. We want people to have the opportunity to be blessed and to be a blessing and to flourish.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. Can I share really quickly what my favorite verse has become in the last couple of years is Ecclesiastes 12:13. And it says, the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. And I realized when I read that a couple of years ago, I was like, that's it. You know, people always ask, like, what is the meaning of life? That's it. It says it literally right there. That's the whole duty of man, to fear God and keep his commandments. Yeah. And that is my greatest desire for my kids, you know, because when they come face to face with the Lord, He is not going to care what university they got into or didn't get into, or how they scored on the ACT, or what kind of grades they got, or whether or not they knew their multiplication facts. Like, he's not going to care about any of that. What he cares about is their relationship with him, and how our kids and how we as their parents served him and impacted this world for Christ. That's what matters most. And so however you're doing that with your kids, that is the calling. And it's a high calling as parents. We have a great responsibility to raise up our kids to love God and to honor him and to keep his commandments and to fear him. And no one else is going to do it for us. So for those parents who have their kids in traditional school, they have just as high of a calling. It's just a different road that they're going to have to take to get their kids to get there.
Yeah. What a great thought to end the show. Yvette, thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you to my guest, Yvette Hampton, for coming on the show today. If you want more resources that help you live out a biblical worldview as a student, parent, educator, or church leader, go to summit.org/resources for articles, videos, ebooks, and more. That website for Yvette, again, is schoolhouserocked.com. See that free documentary, check out the blog, and start engaging in the discussion. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to today's episode. The Dr. Jeff Show podcast is a resource of Summit Ministries. Summit equips and supports the rising generation to embrace God's truth and champion a biblical worldview. If you want more resources that can help you live out a biblical worldview as a student or reach the next generation as an educator, church leader, or parent, head over to summit.org/resources to find out about the programs, the articles, the videos, the ebooks, and more that we offer. Also, if you're looking for more great podcasts that will build your faith and inspire you, our friends at Edify have what you need. You can find more podcasts, including the Dr. Jeff Show podcast, on the Edify app. Download it at edify.app, spell EDIFI. And then you can also search for it in the Apple Store or the Google Play Store.